The gala was perfect. Laughter, sparkling chandeliers, everyone celebrating. And then, out of nowhere, a cake smashes into a black woman's face. But in just minutes, that shocking moment would destroy a $5 billion deal and leave everyone speechless. The room fell silent the very moment it happened. Crystal chandeliers sparkled above, champagne glasses clinked softly, and an orchestra played in the background. But all of that faded the second people saw the heiress raise her hand, her diamond rings glittering under the light, and slam a piece of cake right across the face of the woman standing near the center table. Gasps echoed across the ballroom like ripples in water. It wasn't just a playful gesture. It wasn't laughter among friends. It was humiliation, raw, cruel, and deliberate. The heiress, dressed in a golden gown that shimmered like molten sunlight, smirked as the creamy frosting slid down the woman's cheek. She didn't expect silence. She expected applause, or at least a few chuckles. After all, wasn't she the daughter of one of the most powerful billionaires in America? Didn't people always laugh at her jokes, even when they weren't funny? But tonight was different. Tonight, the crowd didn't laugh. They froze, because the woman who now stood with cake dripping from her face wasn't just anyone. She was a guest, a dignified, calm, and elegant black woman whose presence had been noticed the moment she walked in. She wasn't loud. She wasn't trying to impress anyone. Yet she commanded respect without even asking for it. She had worn a navy blue dress, simple but graceful, her hair styled neatly, her smile warm and genuine. People had whispered about her when she arrived. Who is she? Why is she here? Does she know the family? No one had a clear answer. But now, after that humiliating act, all eyes turned to her. Her hand rose slowly, trembling just a little as she wiped the cream away from her cheek. Her eyes met the heiress's, and for a brief second, the golden-gowned girl faltered. Because there was no anger there, no tears, no visible humiliation. Only quiet strength. The woman didn't shout. She didn't scream. She didn't push back or retaliate. She simply looked at her, calm, unflinching. That silence was louder than any words could have been. The heiress laughed nervously, brushing her hair back. Oh, come on, everyone. It's just cake. Don't look at me like that. She knows I was only joking. But no one responded. Not a single polite chuckle came from the tables. The orchestra had even slowed down, the violinist missing a note as he glanced toward the scene. The heiress suddenly realized she might have gone too far, yet her pride wouldn't allow her to back down. The woman, with cake still smeared across her cheek, reached for a napkin. Slowly, gracefully, she dabbed her face clean. She wasn't rushing. She wasn't flustered. Her every movement was deliberate, dignified, and composed. She looked around the room, meeting the eyes of dozens of people who were waiting for her reaction. And then, in a voice soft but firm, she said just 5 words. That was very uncalled for. The simplicity of her tone cut deeper than any shouted insult could have. It was as though she had peeled away the glittering mask of power and exposed the heiress for what she was: careless, entitled, and deeply insecure. The crowd shifted uncomfortably. A few people turned their heads, pretending to sip champagne. But the energy had changed. The room was no longer under the heiress's control. What the heiress didn't realize was that this woman, this guest she had just publicly humiliated, was no ordinary attendee. She wasn't there by accident. She wasn't just someone's +1. She had been invited personally by someone who mattered a great deal. And in the next 30 minutes, the entire course of a $5 billion business deal would crumble before everyone's eyes. All because of a piece of cake and a cruel moment of arrogance. The woman didn't storm out. Instead, she smiled politely and walked toward the edge of the ballroom. Guests parted as she moved, some murmuring apologies under their breath, others giving her looks of sympathy. The heiress stood frozen, her laughter now sounding hollow, her cheeks flushing red as whispers spread like wildfire. Somewhere near the stage, her father, the billionaire host, was frowning, clearly aware something had gone very, very wrong. But the woman's calm exit wasn't the end. It was just the beginning, because while everyone assumed she would leave quietly and disappear into the night, she had other plans. Plans that would expose the true character of the family everyone in that ballroom claimed to admire. And when she finally spoke again, not only would she command the attention of the entire room, but she would also shut down the billion-dollar agreement her presence had been meant to celebrate. What the heiress thought was a harmless joke would turn into the single most disastrous mistake of her life. The whispers spread faster than the music could cover them. People leaned toward each other, their champagne glasses forgotten, their eyes darting between the heiress and the woman who had just left the center of the ballroom. Who is she? Did you see how calm she was? This is going to be bad. The heiress shifted nervously, her smile twitching as she tried to pretend nothing had happened. But deep down, she could feel it. Her moment of fun had turned into a heavy silence pressing down on her shoulders. At the far side of the room, her father, the billionaire whose name was stamped on newspapers, buildings, and entire industries, was locked in a stiff conversation with two executives. They too had witnessed the scene, and though they didn't say it out loud, their sharp glances spoke volumes. He raised his hand, signaling his daughter to come closer. She hesitated, then hurried toward him, her golden gown sweeping across the marble floor. What on earth was that? He hissed under his breath, keeping his tone low so only she could hear. Do you have any idea who that woman was? The heiress blinked, suddenly unsure. She was just some guest, Dad. I was joking. Everyone's too sensitive. Her father's jaw clenched. That guest is not just some random woman. She is the lead negotiator for the African delegation. The deal we've been working on for months. The $5 billion agreement for the new energy project. It was her job to finalize it tonight. And you just humiliated her in front of everyone. The color drained from the heiress's face. For the first time, she realized the gravity of what she had done. It wasn't just a party trick gone wrong. It wasn't just a silly moment people would forget. She had attacked the very person her father needed the most. Meanwhile, the woman, still graceful and composed, stepped out onto the balcony overlooking the glittering city skyline. She inhaled the cool night air, her fingers still holding the napkin she had used to wipe her cheek. She wasn't crying. She wasn't angry. But she was thinking about the meaning of respect, about how power often blinded people to humanity, about how this single act revealed so much about the family hosting the gala. A young man, a junior executive who had been assigned to assist her, followed nervously onto the balcony. Ma'am, I'm so sorry for what just happened. I don't even know what to say. She turned to him, her eyes soft but steady. You don't need to apologize. You weren't the one who did it. Then she added, almost as if to herself, but it tells me everything I need to know about who I'm dealing with. Back inside, the heiress's father tried to smooth things over. He ordered the band to play louder, instructed the servers to bring out more champagne, and told his daughter to stay out of sight. But the damage was already done. The story of what had happened was buzzing through the room. Investors who had been excited about the partnership now looked uneasy. Board members whispered to each other, exchanging knowing glances. The air was heavy with discomfort. The woman stayed on the balcony for a few more minutes, letting the music and chatter fade behind her. Then, with quiet determination, she turned and re-entered the ballroom. This time, people stepped aside for her with even greater respect. Conversations hushed as she walked back toward the front of the room. The billionaire himself, sensing what was coming, stood tall, forcing a smile as though nothing had gone wrong. Ladies and gentlemen, the woman said, her voice carrying easily across the hall without the need for a microphone. The music faded as the band members put down their instruments, compelled by the authority in her tone. I came here tonight to celebrate a partnership that promised progress, innovation, and shared success. But what I witnessed instead was arrogance, disrespect, and a reminder that dignity cannot be bought with money. The room fell completely silent. Every eye was on her. Even the heiress, now standing behind her father, froze like a statue, her chest rising and falling rapidly. I was prepared to sign an agreement tonight, the woman continued. An agreement worth billions. But after what just happened, after being treated not as a partner, not as a professional, not even as a guest, but as a prop in someone's cruel joke, I cannot, in good conscience, move forward. Gasps erupted. Someone dropped a glass, the sharp shatter echoing like a punctuation mark to her words. The billionaire's smile faltered, his hands clenching tightly behind his back. His daughter's eyes widened with horror as the realization sank in. The woman didn't raise her voice. She didn't need to. The calm firmness of her words was enough to shake the entire room. Respect is the foundation of every partnership. Without it, contracts are meaningless. And tonight, I saw clearly that respect is missing here. She looked directly at the billionaire, her gaze unwavering. Therefore, as of this moment, the African delegation withdraws from this deal. There will be no partnership. There will be no agreement. A murmur rolled through the crowd like thunder. The billionaire took a step forward, desperation breaking through his polished exterior. Please, this is a misunderstanding. My daughter didn't mean it. She's young, foolish at times, but I assure you, our company values. The woman raised her hand, silencing him without another word. The authority in her gesture was undeniable. It's too late. Actions speak louder than apologies. And tonight, your actions spoke volumes. She turned to leave. The crowd parted for her once more, but this time with a reverence that was unmistakable. Some people even nodded quietly in approval, as though they had been waiting for someone to finally expose the cracks in the billionaire's glittering empire. The heiress's face was pale, her lips trembling as she watched the deal slip away. Not because of her father, not because of business rivals, but because of her own careless cruelty. And so, with the elegance of a queen, the woman walked out of the ballroom, leaving behind silence, shame, and the ashes of a billion-dollar dream. But this wasn't the end of the story. It was only the second act. Because while the heiress thought she had just lost a business deal, what was truly at stake was her reputation, her family's legacy, and the empire they had built. And in the days that followed, the entire world would hear about what happened that night. The night after the gala, the headlines exploded. Social media feeds lit up with blurry videos and shocked captions. Someone had captured the exact moment the heiress shoved the cake across the woman's face. And within hours, it was everywhere. Millions of views, thousands of comments, and a storm of outrage that couldn't be contained. Entitled Heiress humiliates delegate at Gala. Cake, cruelty, and the collapse of a $5 billion deal. The party that destroyed an empire. The billionaire's family woke up to chaos. Reporters swarmed outside the mansion gates. Journalists camped out near the office. And the stock price of the company dipped by several percentage points before the market had even officially opened. Investors panicked, employees whispered, and rivals grinned quietly in their offices, watching the empire unravel. Inside the mansion, the heiress sat curled up on a velvet couch, scrolling through her phone in disbelief. Comment after comment tore into her. Some called her spoiled. Others labeled her racist. Many demanded accountability. Her face, smeared with a smug grin from the party, had become a meme overnight. She felt sick, but worse than the public anger was the look on her father's face as he paced the room. Phone pressed to his ear, trying and failing to control the damage. "Do you understand what you've done?" he snapped after ending yet another angry call from a board member. Do you even realize that this wasn't just about you embarrassing yourself? You embarrassed me. You embarrassed this family. And you cost us $5 billion. The heiress stammered, tears threatening to fall. I didn't mean it, Dad. I swear, it was just supposed to be a joke. I didn't think. That's the problem, he roared, his face red with fury. You never think. You've been shielded your whole life. And now your foolishness has destroyed everything I've built. Do you know how many years of work went into that deal? Do you know what this means for the company? She buried her face in her hands, sobbing. For once, she couldn't talk her way out of it. She couldn't smile, charm, or laugh and make people forget. This wasn't high school gossip or a socialite scandal that would fade in a week. This was bigger than her. Meanwhile, the woman who had been humiliated, the delegate, returned to her hotel suite across the city. Her phone buzzed endlessly with calls from reporters and messages of support from colleagues. She ignored most of them, preferring instead to sit quietly with a cup of tea, watching the city lights flicker outside her window. She had not set out to make headlines. She had not come to America looking for drama. All she had wanted was to secure a partnership that could bring jobs, energy, and progress to her country. But if respect wasn't part of the deal, then no amount of money could make it worthwhile. Her assistant entered the room, looking both nervous and excited. Madam, the press wants a statement. They're asking if you'll go on television. She shook her head. No interviews. Not yet. The world already saw what happened. My silence will say more than my words right now. But silence didn't stop the storm. Within days, the incident became a symbol. Commentators on talk shows debated privilege and power. Activists pointed to the humiliation as an example of deeper injustices. And ordinary people, watching from their phones, took sides. The woman became a hero to some, a figure of dignity, calm, and strength in the face of cruelty. The heiress, on the other hand, became a villain overnight. The billionaire's board held an emergency meeting. They demanded damage control. They suggested public apologies, charity donations, anything to soften the blow. The heiress's face was everywhere, and not in a way the company could spin. She was poison to their brand now. Her father fought back, insisting she was family, but even he knew the truth. If the company was to survive, they might have to distance themselves from his own daughter. The heiress felt the walls closing in. Friends stopped answering her calls. Invitations she once received daily dried up overnight. Even people she had grown up with avoided her now, not wanting to be tainted by association. She had never been alone before, and now suddenly she was desperate. She drafted an apology to post online. "I want to sincerely apologize," the statement began. She hoped people would forgive her, but when she hit post, the backlash was immediate. "Too late." One comment read, "You're only sorry you got caught." Another added, "If you were really sorry, you wouldn't have done it in the first place." The apology that was meant to save her reputation only fueled more anger. Meanwhile, the delegate quietly returned home. Crowds greeted her at the airport with applause, holding signs that read "Dignity over dollars" and "Respect is priceless." She had not asked to be a symbol, but she had become one anyway. And as she looked at the faces of the people she was fighting for, she knew she had made the right choice. But across the ocean, in the billionaire's mansion, the heiress sat in her room, staring at the walls, her phone buzzing with fresh waves of hate. For the first time in her life, she was learning a painful truth. Money could buy luxury, power, and attention, but it could not buy respect. And once respect was lost, it was almost impossible to earn back. Still, deep down, she wasn't ready to give up. Somewhere in the corner of her heart, a spark of defiance remained. She told herself she would find a way to turn things around. She couldn't let this be the end of her story. But what she didn't realize yet was that redemption would require more than words, more than money. It would require something she had never truly given before: humility. And humility was the one thing she had spent her whole life running from. The days turned into weeks, but the scandal refused to fade. Each morning, newspapers carried fresh stories about the fallen heiress, each headline more brutal than the last. Magazines that once celebrated her fashion choices now printed unflattering photos with captions like, "From riches to ruins." News anchors dissected her every move, while late-night comedians made her the punchline of endless jokes. Her father grew colder toward her. Once a man who had doted on his only daughter, showering her with gifts and indulgence, he now looked at her as though she were a stranger. "You've become a liability," he told her one evening, his voice stripped of warmth. "The board wants me to distance myself from you. If I don't, they'll force me out." The words struck her like a slap. Distance? From her own father? From the man whose empire she had always assumed would one day be hers? She tried to argue, but he raised a hand. "Enough. You've done enough damage." Then he walked away, leaving her alone in the cavernous dining hall, the echo of his footsteps louder than any argument she could have made. The heiress retreated into isolation. She stopped going out, stopped posting on social media, stopped answering calls. The silence that once terrified her now surrounded her like a heavy cloak. At night, she scrolled endlessly through the comments about her, unable to look away, each cruel word carved into her pride. But buried among the hate were occasional questions that pierced even deeper. Does she even understand why what she did was wrong? Has she ever faced consequences in her life? At first, she dismissed them. Of course she understood. She had apologized, hadn't she? But as the days dragged on, those questions haunted her. Did she understand? Had she really thought about what it felt like to be humiliated in front of hundreds of people? Reduced to a joke for no reason other than someone else's amusement? The memory replayed in her mind. The smirk on her own face, the silence in the room, the quiet dignity of the woman wiping her cheek. For the first time, shame dug deeper than anger. One morning, she woke to find her name trending again. But this time, not because of something she had done. It was because the woman she had humiliated had given her first public interview. Sitting across from a respected journalist, the delegate spoke calmly, her voice steady as always. "I hold no hatred toward her," the woman said when asked about the heiress. "But the incident reminded me, and the world, that respect must come before wealth. I don't seek revenge. I simply wanted to send a message. Dignity cannot be trampled, not even by those who believe they are untouchable." The heiress watched the interview 3 times in a row. There was no malice in the woman's words, no bitterness, just truth. And it cut deeper than any insult ever could. The heiress realized that while she had been drowning in self-pity, the woman she had wronged had risen with grace, admired more now than ever before. That night, unable to sleep, the heiress scribbled furiously in a notebook. She wrote letters she never sent, apologies she rehearsed but couldn't voice. She thought about flying to the woman's country, about begging for forgiveness in person, about making some grand gesture. But each idea felt shallow, performative, like just another way to save herself. What she needed wasn't a performance. What she needed was change. Her first step came quietly. Without telling her father or the press, she reached out to a community organization that worked with underprivileged youth in the city. She offered to volunteer. Not donate money, not write a check, but actually show up. The director, skeptical at first, reluctantly agreed. And so, one rainy Saturday morning, the heiress found herself in a modest community center, wearing jeans and a plain sweatshirt, surrounded by children who had no idea who she was. At first, she fumbled. She didn't know how to connect, what to say, or even how to act without the shield of her status. But the children didn't care about her wealth or her scandal. They just wanted someone to listen, someone to laugh at their jokes, someone to help them with homework or play games. And slowly, awkwardly, she began to learn. She washed dishes after meals, carried boxes of supplies, read stories to restless kids. It wasn't glamorous. No one was taking pictures. No reporters knew she was there. But for the first time in her life, she felt something real, something untainted by money or expectation. She felt useful. Weeks turned into months. The media still hounded her. The jokes still surfaced online, but the noise began to matter less. For the first time, she wasn't living for the headlines. She was living for the moments when a child's face lit up because she remembered their name, or when a tired parent thanked her for staying late to help. She was beginning to understand humility, not as a punishment, but as a gift she had denied herself her whole life. Yet even as she changed, the world wasn't ready to forgive her. Her name still carried the weight of scandal. Her father's company continued to suffer, struggling to rebuild after the collapse deal. And the woman she had humiliated remained silent, distant, a figure she had not seen since that fateful night. The heiress knew that redemption wasn't complete. Not yet. She had taken her first steps, but the most important one still lay ahead. She would have to face the woman herself. Not with cameras, not with speeches, but face to face, eye to eye, and heart to heart. And when that moment came, it would decide whether she truly deserved a second chance, or whether the world would forever remember her as the girl who destroyed a billion-dollar deal with a single cruel laugh. Months later, when the leaves had begun to turn gold and red, the heiress boarded a plane without any press release, without any entourage, and without telling her father. She wasn't flying to an exotic island for vacation, nor to a European fashion week as she once would have. She was flying to the country of the woman she had wronged. Her hands trembled slightly as she clutched the boarding pass. For someone who had once floated through life without consequence, this single journey felt heavier than all her years of privilege. When she landed, the world she entered was different from the glittering ballroom she had known. Bustling streets, markets filled with the scent of spices, children laughing barefoot near fountains. It was vibrant, alive, and real. And in the middle of this world stood the office of a woman whose quiet strength had changed everything. The heiress stood outside the building, her heart racing. She had rehearsed words 100 times in her head. But now, face to face with the heavy wooden doors, they all seemed to vanish. Still, she pushed forward. Inside, a receptionist looked up in surprise as she gave her name. "I was hoping she might see me," the heiress stammered. The receptionist hesitated, then picked up the phone. Minutes later, the woman appeared, as composed as ever. For a moment, time seemed to freeze. The heiress had seen this face countless times in newspapers and television interviews, but here in person, the memory of that night came flooding back. The smirk on her own lips, the stunned silence of the crowd, the frosting dripping down the woman's cheek. She lowered her gaze, shame burning hot in her chest. "I didn't think you'd actually come," the woman said softly. Her tone wasn't hostile, but it wasn't warm either. It was measured, controlled. "I had to," the heiress whispered. "I've spent months trying to understand what I did. I don't expect forgiveness. I need to tell you I'm sorry. Not for the headlines, not for the deal, but for how I treated you, for forgetting that you're a person with dignity, not just a face in a crowd." The woman studied her for a long moment. The silence stretched, but the heiress didn't move, didn't speak again. She let the weight of her own words linger, afraid even to breathe too loudly. Finally, the woman motioned toward a small seating area. "Sit," she said. They sat across from each other, two women from completely different worlds, bound together by one ugly moment that had changed both of their lives. "You think an apology is enough?" the woman asked, her eyes steady. The heiress shook her head quickly. No, I know it's not. I know I hurt more than just you. I hurt your people, your work, the trust you brought to that room. I can't undo that. But I've tried to change. I've been working at a community center, listening instead of talking, helping instead of demanding. It's not much, but it's something. For the first time, I feel like I'm learning what respect actually means. The woman leaned back, her fingers tapping lightly on the armrest. Respect isn't a lesson you learn in a few months. It's a lifetime practice. And you, she paused, then added, you were raised to believe the world revolved around you. That doesn't change overnight. I know, the heiress said quietly, her voice breaking. But I'm willing to spend the rest of my life proving it doesn't revolve around me. I'm not asking you to forget what I did. I just hope, maybe one day, you can believe I've changed. The room was still. Outside the window, the sounds of the bustling city carried in faintly. Horns, voices, laughter. Finally, the woman stood, her posture tall, her presence commanding as always. What you did cost me trust in that room, she said. But what it gave me was something greater. It reminded the world that dignity matters, that respect matters, and that even the powerful can be held accountable. She paused, then softened just a little. If you truly want to change, then let your life, not your words, prove it. The heiress stood as well, tears welling in her eyes. She nodded slowly. Thank you for giving me even that chance. There was no hug, no dramatic forgiveness, no sweeping reconciliation, just a quiet understanding. A fragile bridge built between two women who would never forget the night that bound them together. And for the heiress, it was enough. She walked out of that office into the sunlight, the noise of the city washing over her, feeling lighter than she had in months. When she returned home, the media still watched her, still waiting for her next misstep. The memes didn't vanish, the jokes didn't stop, but she no longer cared in the same way. She kept working at the community center. She kept learning, kept listening. Slowly, very slowly, people began to notice the difference. Not in headlines, but in whispers. She's not the same anymore, they said. She's trying. And though she knew she could never erase the night she smashed cake across another woman's face, she also knew that the story didn't have to end there. Mistakes could destroy, but they could also transform. And sometimes, the deepest humiliation could become the first step toward becoming human at last. Because money can buy power. Money can buy beauty, fame, and even fear. But the one thing money can never buy is respect. That, she finally understood, is something you have to earn, moment by moment, choice by choice, for the rest of your life. And so, the heiress who had once been known for her cruelty was now known for something else. Not perfection, not redemption, but the courage to face what she had done and to try, every day, to be better than the girl she once was. If this story shocked you and left you speechless, make sure to hit that like button and subscribe to our channel so you never miss more shocking and amazing stories. And don't forget to turn on the notification bell to be the first to know when our next video drops.